The Wall Street Journal with an amazing piece that caught my eye last night, so we had to have one of the reporters on it. How one tweet turned pro-China trolls against the NBA, written by Georgia Wells, Tom McGinty, and our next guest, Ben Cohen from the Wall Street Journal. How are you, Ben?
I am okay. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. So lay it out for me. What did you endeavor here in this article for those who might not have read it?
Well, we wanted to see exactly what happened once Daryl Morey pressed send on that infamous tweet about 10 days ago and was quickly swarmed by replies and, became the most interesting man in geopolitics for a few days, shockingly. And, I think anyone with eyes could see that these accounts that were telling him that his mother was dead and had 0 followers and had never tweeted before, there was something fishy going on here. And so what we were able to do using the data from a couple of Clemson University researchers was analyze about 170,000 tweets that were sent at him over the course of a week after that first tweet. And what we found was that a startling, sort of astonishing number of them came from accounts with 0 followers, came from accounts that didn't exist until he sent that first tweet. And what people who look at this for a living, these disinformation researchers, say is that, they have never seen anything like this that is not affiliated with a state operation. And so essentially that these were pro-China trolls, not just bots, but possibly even humans at a keyboard who were sort of targeting him in this harassment campaign meant to manipulate the conversation about China and Hong Kong. So, that tweet started this whole thing, and this whole thing has just sort of been so misunderstood and hard to grasp in real time. And so, just looking at exactly what happened from the beginning and putting some numbers to it and actually crunching the data seemed like a pretty good place to start.
And so what does the data tell you, Ben? Does it point in the direction? Obviously, the Chinese government must have been the ones to orchestrate all this. Has that fingerprint been discovered through this?
Well, that's what it appears. I mean, it's hard to say that definitively. What one of the researchers says is that he's only seen this type of behavior when it is state-backed. But just looking at the numbers, it's they kind of speak for themselves. I mean, 50% of these tweets that were sent at him came from accounts with fewer than 13 followers. Almost 4,000 tweets almost 4,000 of the accounts didn't even exist until he sent his first tweet. I mean, so, he was bombarded by 170,000 tweets. At the peak of this troll activity, they were appearing at his phone at a rate of nearly 2 per second, which, you just think about, if you're actually trying to keep up with your Twitter replies on your phone, to get 170,000. I mean, it's just astonishing. And the fact that so many of them seem to spout pro-China rhetoric, so an anti-Hong Kong sentiment, when the organic discussion, if you take out those accounts that had 0 followers and appear to be linked with China, it's actually the opposite. There was a lot of support for Daryl Morey and a lot of support for the Hong Kong protests, so they were trying to make it seem like this discourse was balanced when, in fact, it really was not.
Ben Cohen, Wall Street Journal columnist here on the Rich Eisen Show. So if we are assuming then that it was state-backed, the question is what's the chicken or the egg here? Is it that the Chinese government saw this, or a member of the Chinese government saw this and then immediately got approval to hit send from all of these bots or from this disinformation campaign to back what they were going to do with the NBA? Or did all of this stuff happen by a proxy, and then the government just came in and wanted to use this for whatever campaign they have against Hong Kong? I'm wondering what to make of all your information here, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating question, Rich, and I have to admit that as an NBA reporter, I was not all that well briefed on Chinese disinformation campaigns until last week, so I'm not entirely an expert on this, but I think what's interesting here is that this effort aligns with, China's state institutions breaking with the NBA and the Rockets at around the same time. So if you remember, I mean, I know it was only 10 days ago now, or 2 weeks, but the big streaming network there, state television, both cut ties with the Rockets. The People's Daily, the Communist Party newspaper, and I know that it's absurd to be talking about this on a show about sports, and it's wild that we're like talking about like communist newspapers and how they attacked an NBA general manager, and all of this sort of happened at the same time. So it's hard to sort of separate all this stuff because it does appear to be an institutional push, and it's sort of hard in America to wrap our heads around the fact that all of these sports institutions in China are backed by the government, right? They sort of move as one. So I think that this Twitter campaign was probably part of it. This is what the evidence suggests, right? I mean, we can't say definitively, but I think if you sort of look at the numbers and use your brain, that's how you come out thinking about this.
Well, Ben, I part of the reason why I'm having you on here, Ben Cohen of the Wall Street Journal, and discussing what we are discussing, and as you say, it's kind of crazy that we're talking about communist papers and things like that on a sports show, if you will, is that this could cost the job of an executive of the year who puts together Harden and Westbrook for an organization that could win the NBA championship right now, who just bestowed upon him, because of how terrific he is at his job, a long-term contract because a tweet got blown up by a whole bunch of bots because he strolled into a geopolitical story that is so monumental. It involves the President of the United States, President Xi, LeBron James, Adam Silver, Nike, Warner Brothers movies. It is insane how many parts of our world this touches, Ben.
And don't forget, like, all of this happening against trade negotiations and a tariff war that could disrupt the global economy. You're totally right. It is. It's absurd that it has come to this, but I do think it's. I struggle to think of a more consequential story for the NBA in a very long time, and in terms of like geopolitical implications, in terms of the tension that existed here for a while, in terms of the magnitude of the crisis. It's one of the most consequential and also the most bizarre episodes, I think, maybe even in the history of American professional sports. I don't know how you really top this.
Well, there's a couple of other things I want to hit with you before I let you go from your piece. Again, as you point out, you cover the NBA for the Wall Street Journal. You're not really an expert on, again, international informational warfare. But here's the article you wrote with your colleagues. When it comes to information warfare, China tends to be defensive and engage on issues relating to sovereignty, according to the researchers, while a country like Russia is more aggressive and inflames online discussions of polarizing topics such as NFL quarterbacks kneeling during the national anthem. And you quote one of the researchers as saying, they, meaning Russia, don't care about Colin Kaepernick. They just want you to talk about Colin Kaepernick. Have they found that the Kaepernick issue was inflamed by Russia? Has that been confirmed by these folks, Ben?
Yeah, and in fact, they have. My colleague Andrew Beaton wrote a great story for the Journal right around this time last year, using some of this research from these same professors who looked at tweets that were backed by Russia and found that, like, among the many people who were talking about Colin Kaepernick or continue to talk about Colin Kaepernick were Russian trolls on Twitter, and that was them going out of their way to sow discord in the United States, whereas China got involved in the NBA because an NBA general manager tweeted about Hong Kong protests, and that is a third rail issue, as most NBA fans know by now. But Colin Kaepernick has no connection to Russia, right? There's no reason for Moscow to care whether or not Colin Kaepernick gets signed or him kneeling during national anthems, but they understand that it contributes to the political discussion in the United States, and that it is a very easy way to inflame tension. So for now, China appears to only engage on issues that matter to them, whereas Russia is more advanced and more aggressive and just likes to, get in the middle of things and mix it up. And, that person yelling at you on Twitter about Colin Kaepernick could easily be a Russian troll, believe it or not.
So what happens next here with Morey and the NBA, based on all that you've gleaned on what obviously the NBA will read your article with your colleagues and try and put it all together with a tip-off coming next Tuesday. What do you think happens, Ben Cohen?
Yeah, it's amazing that the tip-off is already next Tuesday. But I do think that the height of the conflict has passed, right? I mean, I think the worst is over for the league, and both sides seem to have retreated from the brink a little bit. And kind of the NBA has gone back to the U.S. China appears to have, told its state institutions to stop going after the NBA. The LeBron thing this week brought it up again a little bit, but I think basketball will start and people will sort of forget about it. But there are huge consequences for the league that I think the league is still beginning to wrap its head around this crisis. And a lot of it is in China's hands. I mean, it depends how far they're willing to take this. The Rockets still have not been restored to Chinese television or any other streaming networks. And, I think it's sort of crazy to say, but, we don't know what the fallout of this will be for a very long time. I mean, I think the league is still trying to figure out what it all means. And, there are implications for the salary cap, for example, that have been discussed if revenue from China, which, until last week was the league's most important foreign market. So there's so much uncertainty right now, and I think the league seems to be pleased that it weathered the storm while they were there, and now they just have to figure out what comes next.
All right, Ben, really appreciate the time. Kudos to you and your colleagues for a thought-provoking piece and one that adds a dimension to this that I don't know if anybody really was casting a light on, and how leagues, I assume, will have to monitor social media from here on out when they make huge decisions or take in the ramifications that might not be real in a way.
Yes, it's a totally new dimension of NBA Twitter, that's for sure.
Ben, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
You got it. Ben Cohen of the Wall Street Journal. I'll go out and read it. How one tweet turned pro-China trolls against the NBA.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.